Morning peeps, I'm back and I thought I'd do a quick video before I watch the Chelsea match because since I did the last video where I was kind of tossing up between Wood and Cunha and slightly leaning towards Cunha, but today's a new day and I want to put forward the case for Chris Wood because I saw a comment on YouTube yesterday that made me think. It made me think because we've all seen all the stats, haven't we, about Forest, how they've dropped off in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And I'll just show you the comment. We'll read the comment because I think it's really interesting. So where are we? Let's find it. So this is a comment on YouTube, and it's actually a comment about one of Harry's videos where he was showing all the stats for Chris Wood and pretty much putting the case for Cunha, I think he was. But let's have a look at this comment. One of the things I don't get is everyone is all fixtures, fixtures, fixtures over form, which is true, isn't it? When we look ahead, we pick based on fixtures. But then they proceed to talk about form coming into a game week. They neglect to mention who the fixtures were. Why are fixtures important looking forward but not looking back? And I think he's made a very valid point here because a lot of statistics that content creators put on their screens do not take into account the quality of the opposition in those previous 6 matches. Often they will look back 6 game weeks. And yes, Forest's form and Wood's form has dropped off. But what we've got to consider is that in that time, they had very heavy fixture congestion. They had a few injuries. They had the FA Cup match with City to distract them. They lost that match, but then 3 days later they're having to play league matches or whatever. So we've had a very, very difficult time of it in terms of fixture difficulty and fixture congestion. And therefore, it's really no surprise, probably, that their stats have in fact dropped off. We saw this with Chelsea, didn't we, about a month or so ago? They went through a bit of a slump. But they came through it. And teams do come through short-term slumps, don't they? So they've had a week to prepare now, Forest. They're home to Leicester. They've got everything to play for. They've got a very good chance of getting a Champions League spot should they beat Leicester and West Ham next week. And, should we really be too concerned about that run of stats when it was kind of clouded by the FA Cup and all the other things? And should we not expect that Wood will bounce back and Forest will bounce back against a Leicester team whose main priority seems to be getting a goal for Jamie Vardy? And to get a goal for Jamie Vardy, they're going to have to attack. And that would suit Forest, who are a good counter-attacking side. So Leicester are going to attack to get a goal for Vardy. They're going to be celebrating like they won their World Cup if Vardy gets a goal, even if they lose 3-1. So so I think there is a strong case for Chris Wood. I mean, we can see on Reddit, this doesn't take into account any of the previous form or whatever. Well, in a sense it does, because it's based on bookmakers' odds, and they still see Wood as third on this list behind Haaland and Mamouche in terms of likely goal scorers this week. Well ahead of Cunha. Almost twice as likely to score as Cunha is this week. Slightly less chance to assist, probably. But the other thing we have to consider is Wolves. Now, Wolves have played very well, which is why I was looking at getting Cunha in. They do have some nice fixtures, especially next week against Palace, which is why I was keen to get in Cunha. But there's a couple of caveats here. One is that Cunha is almost certainly leaving at the end of the season. Two, Bellegarde, his likely replacement, is now fit again. And will the manager, they haven't been on the beach, they've been playing well, considering they don't really have anything to play for. But is now the last three games of the season the time when they might start to look at bedding in Bellegarde and, you know, is it the time when we will see a bit of forward thinking from Wolves towards next season rather than the immediate games? Obviously, City was like a great motivator for them. Everyone's going to get up to play City. But going to Brighton, it's not kind of quite the same thing, really, is it? So, like I said, I've kind of changed my view a little bit now, and because one other thing is that the perfect replacement for Mamouche next week. City have got Bournemouth 3 days after the FA Cup final, so Mamouche pretty much time to go, I suspect, especially with Haaland back. And the natural replacement for Haaland, for Mamouche, is Cunha. So if I get Cunha this week and neglect Wood's great fixture, what do I do next week? Who do I bring in? Because it's obviously too late to bring Chris Wood in, really, for the last two. So the ideal way to do it, I suspect, is to bring Wood in this week for Mateta, and then next week bring in Cunha for Mamouche. That seems to make the most sense. Or Watkins if you can afford him even. But yeah, so I'm now leaning back towards Wood. And I was thinking, when I woke up this morning, I was thinking, what am I most worried about this week? And I said it in the video yesterday. There's two things that are going to give me a sleepless night this weekend. Literally, they will. The first one is De Bruyne. I think it's like 2 in the morning here. I will not be able to sleep through that game without dreaming that De Bruyne scored a hat trick. And I'll turn the computer on and he will have done. But there's two things I was worried about. One of them's De Bruyne, and the second one is Nottingham Forest, because I don't own any other assets. I looked at Elanga, but I decided Mateta was the best player for me to take out this week. And not having Chris Wood, 30% ownership at the moment. I think it will rise before deadline. Cunha's only about 14, which is great for differentials as such, but I think I might end up with Cunha next week anyway. And that's pretty high ownership for Wood in what could be a pretty one-sided match, because Forest haven't been great. We know they haven't been great. The stats, so like I said, I do think paint a slightly negative picture. They've been poor all season, their stats, really. But they have still performed, haven't they? I mean, I bought Elanga in for 1 week, and it turned out to be a really good move. He got me a lot of points. So I'm hoping if I do the same with Wood, it might turn out the same way. You never know. So, yeah, I just wanted to come on and highlight that comment because I found it quite interesting because a lot of people put these surface level stats on their shows for the previous 6 weeks, but it's true that they don't actually take into account the circumstances of those 6 weeks often, do they? We just put up the raw numbers and expect them to be the same going forward. Anyway, peeps, what else have we got here on Reddit? Let's have a look. I'll put it down to here we go. I was on the wrong page. Yeah, let's have a look. These are the scout picks of the week. Now they do have Wood in, of course, as they would, because Wood does have a better fixture this week. But over the 3 fixtures, I think Cunha does edge it. But like I said, why not bring both in, really? Because players with something to play for the last few games There's not many, but you can pretty much guarantee, I think, that Forest are going to be in contention for Champions League right up until game week 38. They've got a Langer in there as well, another one I was considering. You could almost do it for a hit, I think, this week. Almost do it for a hit. The only reason I'm not is because I don't want to take all my Forest players out before they play Tottenham. So I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll have five of these players. You don't want too many of them because they often don't do very well as scout picks. Right, so Tielemans is out injured, possibly missing the end of the season. That's not good for Villa. He's quite decent. What else have we got here? Transfer trends amongst forwards. Chris Wood the most. Haaland's coming in. I don't know why it's got Strand Larsen as the player out, but I suspect that whichever player out it is, this is the kind of thing that's happening. And Chris Wood is going to be the largest bubble, I think, for strikers coming in. Mentioned Visser though. There's quite a few Visser ones from Isaac, which is kind of weird if you ask me, but still. What have we got? Yeah. Salah departing. Players departing. Salah to Parma even. A few Sakas to De Bruyne's, Murphy's to De Bruyne's. Very smaller bubble than the other one, isn't it? And whatever. Anyway, peeps, so that's basically about it. You know, I'm kind of am leaning more towards Chris Wood now. I think I am leaning more towards Chris Wood. It's just too scary not to. I mean, sometimes you can overthink FPL, and you've got a Forest team chasing a Champions League spot at home to a team that has nothing to play for except getting Jamie Vardy his 200th goal of the season, and also pretty much one of the worst teams in the Premier League. So, you know, why overthink it? Why weigh yourself down in stats when you've just got something that kind of obvious right in front of you? So I think that's the way I'm going now. So this probably is the last video of the week. Like I said, it's been very difficult trying to decide who to bring in. Very difficult. But I think it's the fact that I can still bring Cunha in next week anyway, which is helping make my decision now. And I know I've changed my mind a few times this week, but that's what you do. If you think about FPL all the time, this is why it takes a while to bash everything into shape and get a, you know, it's rather than just doing something off the cuff and then realizing later on that you've missed out on various factors that you should take into consideration. Anyway, peeps, I'm off now. I've got to watch Chelsea and then I'm out for a run. So I'll talk to you all later. So like and subscribe, and cheers for now then, peeps.